So there is this process that I think everybody goes through in life. And they're going to find them, if they look at the poem, the process, they're going to find themselves somewhere on there, whether it's at the very beginning, whether they're announcing it to the world, whatever they're doing, whether they're celebrating, which celebration is the last, it always ends up in celebration. And then it's just the pathway there. You will find yourself in one of those words, one of those steps of the process. And your process might be a little bit different, so you might switch some words around, but we're all going through that with whatever we're tackling, whatever we're doing in life. So I was just, that's how it basically came about, just realizing that I was going through something that I had gone through before, and I questioned why that was happening.
Welcome to Faith and What Resonates, a show that explores the intersection of faith and spirituality, music and art, and the ways that we make meaning. I'm Gail Gallagher, professional musician and lifelong seeker. I am a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church, and one of our core principles is that everyone has their own free and responsible search for truth and meaning, which is a great subject for a podcast, right? On this show, I talk to musicians, artists, clergy, and just other awesome people with cool stories to tell, and we explore the magic of the things that resonate. My guest today is Kerstin Schaefer. She is a poet, writer, motivational speaker, awesome human. I actually met her at the Chicago Lit Fest back in September, which is this awesome festival of authors, and you get to hang out and meet cool people. And we struck up a conversation, and she was like, I have this poem that I think could be a song. Can I give you my book? And then we can see if it could be a song. And it's a song now. So we talk about Kerstin's spiritual journey, and then we also talk about the song and the creative process, which the song is about the creative process, so it gets really meta. Anyway, let's jump into the conversation. All right, I am here with Kerstin Schaefer, and we are on the Zoom. And go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do in the world.
Hi, Gail. Actually, it's pretty simple what I do in the world. Like a few years back, I played a little game with myself after I watched the movie 2012, which, has the whole end of the world, flood, people have to go on the ships and all that kind of stuff. And the people allowed on the ships were basically people that were either rich, which I am not, or the people that had something to offer for the new world once the old world went away. And so I thought for myself, what do I have to give? What can I give to the world? What do I have? And it came down to a very simple thing where I encourage people. I do this on a daily basis. I don't do it as a professional per se. I don't have a degree, but my path is to encourage women and to connect with them and to support them in whatever capacity that I can, whether it's the written form, whether it is orally in conversations. It doesn't matter, women, all shapes and sizes, whatever season they find themselves in. But over the last few years, I have come to find that is my path in the world.
Listeners, how we met is
it was the Chicago Lit Fest.
The Chicago Lit Fest, mm-hmm. Yes, which is this, I almost said like this giant book party downtown.
It is.
But the Chicago Lit Fest, where there's all these authors with their displays, and you and I struck up a conversation, and you were like, I was like, I'm a songwriter, and you were like, I have a poem that should be a song, and then we made a song happen, which we'll talk about later.
Yes.
This has been a journey. Anyway, I'm excited to dive deep with you today. So tell the audience a little bit, sort of the broad strokes, how it started, how it's going of your faith journey.
It's really interesting, and having this podcast, doing that with you today, has me really made think about my journey more. And I have come to the conclusion that for most of my life, which I'm at the half point, past the half point, but most of my life, I was in a spiritual coma. I would consider it, with some peaks here and there. And my spiritual journey really, truly only started about 6 years ago. So growing up in Germany, not going to church, not really hearing about God except from my grandparents. My parents didn't talk about it. We went to Christmas service. I don't think I ever had my parents say the word Jesus ever as I was growing up. So it wasn't there. And then confirmation happened at 13, 14, not because we were believers, but because that was just the thing that you did. It was tradition. So mom baked a lot of cakes and pies. I got a lot of gifts for my future marriage, is what the gifts were. And so went through confirmation, and somehow something resonated with me after that I would, on my own, take about 45 minutes to an hour trip, walking to church. I would take that upon myself to just go to church every Sunday. And the church was very empty. It was maybe 10 people max. It was a huge church, but it wasn't a lot of people because in Germany you have the state connected with the church. So you're assigned a church wherever you live. You're assigned a specific church dependent on your faith. And the two faiths that we had was Lutheran and Catholic. And so people resent being assigned something if they can't choose. So now a lot of people showed up. This church somehow got together a youth group, and I started going there and felt good about it, but apprehensive. At one point, the youth leader was pushing me, and I don't even know what it was, but he was pushing me to go deeper, and it scared me. And I backed off and I never went back. So that was a little peak at that time, but I got scared and I had the fear, and I went back inside because that's where I had a safe place. And as I was going along through the years, when I met my husband, he was getting involved in the church. So there we started going to church, but it was all very superficial. It was all very much, we were the tall people because I'm 6'1", my husband's 6'3". So we were the tall people in first row, basically, because nobody in Lutheran churches sits in the first row, right?
No one in any church sits in the first row, except the nerds. I mean, I'll sit in the first row, but like...
Yeah, exactly. So we decided we're going to be different. We're going to go into the first row. And that's how people actually knew us. They didn't know us by name because we didn't make connections at that church. We got married at that church, but we didn't make connections otherwise. But they knew us, oh yeah, the tall people at first row. And then we decided to switch that church, go to another church from there, where we made connections. Again, we went deeper, but it all seemed still very coma-like. It was all being, from my point of view, I'm not talking about anybody else but myself. From my point of view, how I was feeling, I was not having a relationship with God. It was just, I was going to church, I was doing the right thing. That was a big thing for when I was growing up, to do the right thing. And after that church, then I decided that that church wasn't giving me, somehow I figured out that church wasn't giving me what I wanted. I actually wanted to know more about God. So I guess it gave me the wanting to know more about God. So I wanted to know more about God, and we switched to a different church in a different town. At that church, again, we had made friends, got involved a little bit more. And then I realized what my problem was that I wanted a relationship with God. I felt he was pursuing me, and I didn't know how to go about it, and the church couldn't help me. It was more about saying the right words and doing the expected correct things compared to having a relationship to God. It was not clicking with me at that church either. So I went to a non-denominational church, dove deeper, felt accepted, felt that it was more of a home at that church, and started to do devotionals and started to really dig into more faith, reading and conversations with God. And then 6 years ago came the darkness that I found myself in a really bad spot, and it ended up being physical stress, huge physical. I was in it was bad physically, and then also emotionally. And when I found myself basically laying on my back in the darkness, not having anywhere else to go, and the only place I could do, or the only thing I could do, is look up and find God there. That's when my spiritual journey started, because he had pursued me so much that I finally, when I was in a dark spot and I couldn't go anywhere else in me, I finally said, okay, I'm done running. What do you want? And because of that's where he found me, and that's how he accepted me like that, seeing me like that. That's what I could build my spiritual journey, my connection with him, my relationship with him on.
It's so interesting. There was a couple things that jumped out at me in that story. First of all, I love the term spiritual coma. Like, I hadn't heard those words before,
Right.
but I get it. But I wanted to sort of unpack that a little bit. So I guess what I got from that is that it's that idea of doing all of the rituals, going through the motions, doing all of the actions, but kind of feeling like you're in a haze. Is that how you would sort of
Right.
describe that?
That's exactly it. And I guess you gotta go back further when I was little, just to unpack that further, because basically what it comes down to, I was afraid. I was afraid to show myself. I was afraid to speak up. I was afraid to have that connection, because you know what, when you go into the Bible and you read in scripture and you read the people that got blessed, oh boy, but you look ahead of before that, the stuff they had to go through, that is scary. And so to me it was like, okay, if I open up, something bad's going to happen. I wasn't even looking at the good down the road. I was just like, something, I don't know if I can handle that. And so I just didn't feel that that I could handle anything that was thrown my way, because in my mind it was still that I had to do it on my own. Because when I grew up, I was basically bullied starting in kindergarten through 10th grade. Different reasons in different schools, but the bullying was going on. And back then, when I went to my parents, it was all, kids will be kids, they'll get over it. Well, they never really got over it. So I felt alone, and I felt like I have to handle this by myself. And I wasn't doing a very good job doing that. But that's where my whole feeling of nobody really wants to hear what I have to say, because whenever I would speak up, I was being bullied more. And so I just retreated within myself. And that's why I was afraid to open up to God and to speak up and let him in.
Yeah, and so much of, like, I mean, I'm curious I want to get more into like how God feels as like an embodiment, because like that's what I'm all about, know. But yeah, I get that, because if you aren't open, because at the end of the day, how we perceive God is very much it's your inner your inner wisdom, like,
yes,
whether that is an inward signal or an outward signal is part of the philosophy of it all. But it's all about trusting your intuition, and you have to trust yourself to be able to trust that still small voice, as it were, right?
Exactly. I agree with that. And with me, it had to do with my relationship with my dad. So, which was very, very, well, it was estranged. It was, he was working a lot. He wasn't around a lot. And we butted, him and I guess I was the black sheep. Him and we always butted heads. And so I had to, at 18 years old, I decided, okay, I'm going to put 6,000 miles between the two of us, the ocean between the two of us. I'm done. I'm leaving Germany. So that's how bad it was, in a sense. Yes. So then having that relationship many times through my spiritual journey, I also, in my physical healing, let's put it that, my physical healing now, I am able to take emotions that I'm feeling now that remind me of emotions that I felt when I was younger, and I'm able to release them. And many times, when it has to do with a belief in God, when something's going on in my emotions, my belief in God, it's from something stemming from my relationship with my dad.
Mm.
Just because, God the Father and my dad.
Yeah, I get that. I respond better to giving God either female pronouns or no pronouns,
Okay.
For reasons, and some of that is just I experience God more from like a maternal place, and also from a maternal wisdom place, from like my actual like, and because my I have this like spiritual relationship with my mom who has passed, it
Right.
feels better for me to use that.
Okay.
But I understand that idea of like of the complications of, okay, God is like the father, but I'm not feeling super chill about my actual father.
Right.
So where does that leave us?
Right.
You
That's
know?
exactly it. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and that was a really exciting part for me when I realized, I don't know, it just never was on my horizon, but I realized there's three in one, right? So you do
Mm-hmm.
have God the Father, which I'm coming to grips with, and I'm understanding, and I'm building my relationship, and then God the Holy Spirit, that inner voice to me, that's what it is, and being able to actually hear him here and there, and then not being scared anymore to follow through with what I'm hearing. So building that relation and trusting that what I'm hearing is correct, even if I feel like I don't think so. I'm not sure I want to go down that road, but trusting that. So building that relationship, and then also finally coming to grips with God, Jesus, the man. So it was a really neat experience to finally say, I get it. On a very simple basis, on a very, very, not like we said, not going too deep, just saying, okay, I get the overall picture at this point. I do get it. I mean, you hear it all the time, three in one, all that in church and everything, but it didn't make sense because that I think it was almost the idea that I wasn't ready to understand, and that I was in this, like I said, in this coma, and a lot of it came from inside, where I just was not ready to totally understand what that really meant, because I wasn't ready to go forward with it. And when I found myself, and it was just, that was it, the darkness was there and I was there, then I was opening myself up, and I said, okay, I'm ready now. And that's when my spiritual journey started.
Yeah. That checks out completely with how these, these moments of spiritual connection happen.
Yeah.
One of my favorite memes is that comes around like once a year, is there's this person sitting on the edge of a cliff, and then the quote says, when we have nothing left, we realize that God is enough. And then underneath it says, but we shouldn't sit on the edge of cliffs. That's just dumb.
Yes, I agree. I wouldn't even get to the cliff because I'm afraid of heights. I'm like, no.
But the sentiment is there, is that when you are completely stripped away, you realize, like, you find that sense. And I'm curious, like, and this, I normally throw this question out at the end, but this is a good time for it now. What does that, if you have to like put a physical descriptor on that sense of knowing and connecting with God? Like, where does that sort of live in your body?
That would be my heart.
Mm.
It would be right to my heart. I felt before, before I woke up, let's just put it that way, before I woke up from my coma, I felt a hardness taking my heart. I knew, I could tell. There's a song, and I don't remember what the song is, but it's like getting hard in my heart, or I don't even remember the line, but there's a song out there. It's a 70s song, I think, and might be Elton John. I'm not sure. Anyway, so that's exactly, I'm like, that reminded me of that I could feel the hardness, and I did not like it. I did not like it. It wasn't right. It was wrong. And I didn't know what to do about it at the time, but I did not like it. I did not like myself. As I'm going through the spiritual journey and the physical healing, the emotional healing, these things are being stripped away. Things are being stripped away. It's like stripping an onion. You're just getting down to the core of things. And through one of my sessions of releasing emotion, it was an emotion that had trapped itself in the heart, and I was releasing that. And after I was able, with the person I'm working with, and after we were able to let go of that, I felt a rush coming through me like no other. I have never experienced that before, and it was so, to me, it's absolutely the heart. That's where it sits. That's where everything sits.
That's beautiful. I love asking that question because it pokes at like this universal, like, feeling of where that lives. And I also like asking that because as you were, talking about your journey of not really having that relationship with God, it is so hard to, especially in the more like traditional, like, church formats, like it there isn't the language always of like, okay, but what does that actually feel like? How do you actually hold on to that? Because it's so ingrained to like who we are as, people who are growing up in the world and getting to know our bodies and getting to know and ourselves enough to slow down and think.
I was just going to actually say that because it's interesting, the times, the spots where you find the spiritual connection, where you hear the voice inside of you. And it's so, I know it's become a thing people say, you gotta slow down, you gotta slow down, you gotta listen, you can't do it all, and all that kind of stuff. I get that, but it really comes down, for me, it comes down to stopping and putting things away that I can't do right now, and then just really stop and be not in the moment, but be open. That's what it is. That's really what it is. To just stop and sit and listen and be open and know that it's okay. Give yourself permission to not have to do something else right now. Give yourself permission to just sit, which is really hard for me. And I would imagine for a lot of people to just, okay, but you know what? I really wanted to do this. I need to vacuum. I need to do that. But give yourself permission to say, that's okay. I'll get it done. It'll still be here, but sit down and listen and just go inward. That's where I find a lot of rest. That's where I get the calm from. That's where I get ideas from. I think I get the best ideas in the car, and it's because, I'm driving, but if you've driven for over 40 years, that's just normal. So you're driving, but if I don't have the radio going, I'm in my head and I'm just like, okay, I can't do anything else. I'm driving. So what am I going to think about?
Some of my biggest moments, or like the first few inklings, in my own, I guess, spiritual coma, trying to work it outness in my 20s, was I say as a wizened 34-year-old.
I was going to say, girl, you look like a teenager. Don't you even worry about it.
But anyway, no, I went to college out of state. I grew up in Iowa, went to college in Nebraska, and the drive out to Nebraska in the middle of I-80, middle of nowhere, Iowa.
Yes.
I would always have like downloads or whatever, like just like really good aha moments and connections and things, because apparently God's just hanging out in the middle of nowhere I-80.
Yeah, in Iowa. Yes, it's amazing where he hangs out. I have to be honest with that.
Like,
But no.
yeah, but it's also, it comes from that space of
Yes.
letting yourself sit and letting yourself relax and your mind clear.
Yes, yes, and that comes in with now you're leading me down a whole nother way. We've talked about that before another time, but it comes when I felt years ago that spirituality, Christianity, or my beliefs and yoga would not mix, just because to me yoga was the whole Buddhist Om thing, and that was not Christianity. And that just came, I think it just came through the years. It was just there. That was my belief at the time. And as I'm going through my journey now, I am realizing that God is not contained in specific areas or in specific people or things. God is all around us. I mean, it's this whole energy that's connecting us. We ourselves have like 3 feet of energy coming from our heart, right? So we're connecting to everybody. When you go into a room, you know the vibe. You know it's bad energy or it's bad, it's good juju. You know what's going on. That energy to me is God connecting us all. And God has given me the tools to heal my body, to heal my mind, to heal my heart. And those are not Christian tools per se, but now I do yoga because that's a tool he's given me. I can do the releasing. I know, I'm learning, I'm curious. I'm a little bit of a seeker, not like you are, but I'm a little bit of a seeker in the world just to be better, have a better me, have a healthier me. And that now I can say, God gives me all of that. Why wouldn't I use that?
Exactly. And you bring up something really interesting about the how Buddhism can sort of be a missing piece for like the Christianity. Well, first of all, if you haven't read any Richard Rohr, and I say this to you and also the audience who's probably used to me quoting Richard Rohr, he will speak a lot about he's a Franciscan priest who talks a lot about like the embodied Christ, and just this idea. Like, he has so many quotables that I will drop, but he has referred to at one point this idea that Buddhism is like really good at the interior practice. Buddhism is very, and basically he's like, Buddhism's very introverted and Christianity's very extroverted. And then, there are caveats in there because you don't want to like completely like dismiss anything.
Right.
But I feel like Eastern practices in, Buddhism and things from that realm are so more focused on the internal reality, and also give you the tools to be like, let's talk about our bodies, which is different with Christianity, where there's so much shame. There can be, depending on what flavor you're with, there can be a lot of shame towards the body.
Right.
Right.
And towards I feel almost towards I don't know if I want to open that box, towards gender. We talked about that too before.
We don't have to open the gender box too much.
Yeah, no, but I agree with you. With you. Why, if something is there, and I truly feel God speaks to me through my inner voice when I, through that small voice, and I always imagine this voice screaming from the top of its lung. The Holy Spirit is like, listen to me, what I'm trying to tell you, and I'm just like, what? I'm not quite. What did you say? Because it sounds small to me. It sounds quiet to me, but I know He's trying to get my attention, and He wants me to go through the noise to get to Him. I get that. And why not? I totally agree with you. Why not use the tools that he has given us to be a better us, so that we can hear him better, so that we can let his light shine through us better, so that we can hear the assignment, the path, what he wants us to do. He's given us all these gifts, and what do we do with it? Why not?
Yeah, there's some quote that I heard that was like, prayer is talking to God and meditating is listening.
I like that.
And yeah, exactly. And also, like, okay, we're trying to dial into a frequency. You know what helps clear your brain? Deep breaths.
Yes.
Like, no matter what religion or what you ascribe that voice to, you know what helps? Breathing.
Yes, count to 10 and breathe. Yes, I totally agree with that.
We'll be back to my conversation with Kerstin Schaefer in a minute, but I wanted to briefly update you with what's happening with New Faith New Media. Now you might ask, what is New Faith New Media? Well, New Faith New Media is an interfaith media network that produces this show, as well as a couple other fine shows, including a pastor and a priest walk into a movie theater, which I've been a guest on here and there whenever they talk about musicals, because that's how we roll. Anyway, we just finished a crowdfunding campaign for our new website. Thank you to everybody who donated. And our new website, newfaithnewmedia.net, will be up very soon, if it isn't up already when you are hearing this podcast. And one of the cool features of newfaithnewmedia.net is we have our very own discussion forum. Yeah, we're taking it back to the early 2000s. But what we want to do is we want to have our own place where people can discuss our shows, have our own corner of the internet. Because let's face it, discussing faith and spirituality in a Facebook group isn't always a vibe. So if you are hearing this and the website is active, head over to our discussion forum and we can talk about this show and other shows, and you can connect with a bunch of other cool people who are exploring the different ways that we make meaning in the world these days. Anyway, that's what's happening. Now back to the conversation. I found a quote that I think also will segue nicely into talking a little bit about your book and your work. But I guess this quote is attributed to Confucius, but I've heard different iterations from different people. But it's this idea: we have two lives, and the second begins when we realize we only have one.
Yes, I read that the other day. Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. Yes. Yes, very much so. And I think, well, I truly believe that everything in my life led up to where I'm at, good, bad, or other, whatever it is. Sometimes I wish, well, maybe if I hadn't done that choice or done this choice, etc. But the thing is, I needed to do that. I needed to be there because I am where I am because of that choice. So everything is good in a sense. And yes, I totally agree with that quote, because that's where I found myself. And I'm like, okay, this is it. When I was physically sick 6 years ago, I'm like, I could die. I'm actually I'm not going to live forever, and I'm not even 50 yet, but there it is. What do I do? And it totally freaked me out. And I realized that I had only so much time left in my life, and I was not where I thought I would be, and I was not happy with who I had become. Like I said, I hardened my heart. So I was not happy because that's not who I was ever. I tried to always be the uplifting. I'm always the glass is full kind of person. But I wasn't able to be the encouraging person anymore because I was so downtrodden. So that took work. And segueing into my book with that, the reason why I wrote it was because I felt very much that I was the only one going through that. And whenever I met with my girlfriends, they were all just fine and everything was great. And we were just, having conversations, but it was just all, they were handling things. And every time I left, I'm like, why can't I do that? Why can't I handle things? And then when it got really bad and I just let it out and just said something to my friends at one point and just said, this is going on in my life. And just a little bit even, they jumped in. One after the other said, oh yeah, me this. And oh yeah, me this. And I just sat there and I'm thinking, now I'm really getting upset because you guys should have shared that with me so I wouldn't feel so alone, right?
That's so universal.
Yes, it is. Yes,
like we all do that.
Yes. And that's why I want to make a point of encouraging people and letting them know that they are not alone. And whether it's through one of my poems or, in my book, I wrote the poetry. It was a brain dump, a God brain dump for like 3 weeks. And I wrote most of the poetry. And then I had a moment where I was just sitting there and I just looked at these poets I had written. And I was looking out into the yard and I heard the voice, and the voice said, make it into a book. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Nobody wants to read this stuff. Nobody wants to do that. Because I, growing up, didn't have a voice. So I didn't feel that it was worth to be listened or read to. And the voice kept it, like I said, screaming at me, I'm sure. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. And so I dug into that. And I had some friends review the poetry that I had. And my problem was that I'm like, okay, here's the poetry. And my challenge was, how do the women reading this poetry understand where I'm coming from so that they don't feel alone? Because you can read the poetry, but sometimes, it's like, okay, whatever she meant by that. All right. And then I had a friend of mine talk to me about poetry a little bit. And that's when that bulb went off. And so that's when I made the trail markers on the other side on the page. And I said, that's my introduction. This is what I thought. This is where I was feeling. This is where you might find yourself. So, and then that connected with the saying on the bottom, the phrase or quote, and then that connects with the poem on the other side. So it all works together, and people will never look at my poetry and say, I don't know where she's coming from. They'll be able to figure that out pretty easy. It's very simply written anyway. So that's either one of the poetry or one of the trail markers on the other side of the page will be able to help women to know that they are not alone, because sometimes that's all we need. We only need to hear that some other person is in the same fight. Because a lot of times we go inward and we just disappear from the world a little bit when we go through things because we're afraid to be seen vulnerable, or we just don't want to deal with it, any of those things, and we just disappear a little bit and we don't talk to our friends as much when we really should be talking to our friends that time.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was writing the book for, is really any woman, any season they find themselves in. I pray that there is something in that book that can uplift them multiple times, hopefully.
For sure. And oh man, I appreciate how you described how the book came together.
Thanks.
And how, and I'm probably going to mention the title of the book when I do the intro for this show, but just listeners, so you know, it's called Midlife Poetry, an invitation to climb the trails at life's halfway point, which that line is so very good. But yeah, I was flipping through it and I noticed those little quotes, and I was like, are we reviewing the poem? But then it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense, where it's just like, it's very in the context of like, I've been there too. So each one of those quotes is saying, I've been there too. And then that trail marker is there. And I also like that you solved the problem of having that insecurity by just making more art. Like, You're like,
Right.
haha.
I was listening to one of the other podcasts from the other week, but uh, I just nodded my head most of the time during the podcast anyway. But the thing is, when you're challenged with something, when you feel like you're not quite sure whether you should go that way, but you're hearing your whole body or your inward is saying, go for it, do it. I have noticed the last few years that when I do go for it, there's always something positive at the other end. There's always something guiding me somewhere else, or the big positive is right then and there. It doesn't matter, but if you follow that, so if you go through the challenge, if you go through what might be holding you back, if you just go a little further, that's when you get the nugget. That's when the good stuff starts. And so it's so great to lean into that, into those moments when you can just push yourself, and you're so happy afterwards when you do. You're so happy afterwards. So yes, absolutely.
This sets up for such a great segue, because as far as just going for it and trusting the moment goes, we need to talk about how this song happened.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So there's a song that will be out in the world after this podcast episode comes out. And it is called The Waltz of Creativity, and it is inspired by your poem, The Process. And I guess tell me a little bit about how that poem came about, and then we'll talk about how this song happened.
It was one of those moments again. I was mostly writing at night when I couldn't sleep, and I was just literally sitting there and just letting things come into my head. And then I realized, you know what? I'm going through the same thing over and over. And I once had heard the saying, oh, how did that go now? Lesson continued until lesson learned. And I was going through something, and I'm like, I've been here before. Why am I not learning this lesson? What's going on? And so I had to deal with that, and I had to approach that. However, at the same token, I was thinking, okay, so I'm stepping back, and then I'm going to go forward. And how did this whole situation happen anyway? And then I'm like, well, I was, I wasn't happy where I was at. And I recognized that. So the recognition, realization, and then you get determined. And I'm like, and this, and this, and this, and this, and just those words just really came one after the other. And I'm like, no, this one comes before that, and this one comes before this. So there is this process that I think everybody goes through in life. And they're going to find them, if they look at the poem, The Process, they're going to find themselves somewhere on there, whether it's at the very beginning, whether they're announcing it to the world, whatever they're doing, whether they're celebrating, which celebration is the last, it always ends up in celebration. And then it's just the pathway there. You will find yourself in one of those words, one of those steps of the process. And your process might be a little bit different, so you might switch some words around, but we're all going through that with whatever we're tackling, whatever we're doing in life. So I was just, that's how it basically came about, just realizing that I was going through something that I had gone through before, and I questioned what that was happening.
And this is going to get really meta, but when I went to write the song, I pulled the 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I had to check if that was in the trail marker or if we just like had a moment. Was that in the trail marker, or did we just
I think we had a moment.
Okay, great, cool. So somehow that came about, and I don't know if I had another podcast in the blender. Oh, by the way, I have this term in songwriting that I borrowed from a songwriter, Amanda Palmer, but it is this idea of the blender. So you have a creative blender in your head and you like throw all the different components in your head. And sometimes the blender setting's like a 1 and you're like, this is me and this is the exact thing I feel. And then sometimes your blender setting's at 10 and that's how you get I am the walrus. But but so anyway, I think I had some creative podcast in my head at that point in the blender, and like something happened with the 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And then what I did is I took every single word of your poem and then I wrote, I started riffing on each word.
Yes.
Somewhere I have the crazy journal I did for this, but anyway, not crazy,
Yes.
but the frantic journaling that I did. And so I got ideas from there, and then just the 2 steps forward, 1 step back made me think of a dance, and then that led to Waltz of Creativity, and it sort of went from there. And and there were other things in the mix, like there's a line, stop to smell the flowers, to capturing that one shade of blue.
Yes.
That line is sort of a take on my own realization that there are times where I like to see the whole picture. I like to see the whole picture of what I'm creating instead of just focusing on one shade of blue. And so one of my mantras is like, just paint the blue. Just paint the blue today. Just paint the blue today.
Right,
So that's kind of from that. But
that's
yeah,
exciting. I think you are so creative. I love what you did with it. I am just amazed that you could take these words in this poem and you came up with what you did. Your creativity is just amazing, and I love your play on words with it. You've got the determination, that you've got trails in there. You've got in there that let the flow in over the fear. I mean, that is just right there. You could talk about that for an hour alone. There, your words in the first one with the muse. Is it going to ghost you again? How do you come up with this stuff? This is just amazing. It is exactly what you go through in a creative process. And I was just very impressed with what you came up with. I was very appreciative of letting me be part of finalizing everything and, of the process, so to speak, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended. It was amazing. I'm so proud of you for doing that. I'm really impressed with it. I love it. I was listening again this weekend, over and over and over, and it's really perfect for the poetry. Thank you.
Sit down for your date with the muse. Hope she doesn't ghost you this time. Open to a blank page and sip your tea. Scribble on the empty lines. Words fall from the pen, stream of consciousness runs clear. Surrender to the process and let flow in over fear. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, the waltz of creativity. Chasing your vision on a mission to make meaning from the pieces of the puzzle only you can see. You're making your map as you go, creating your own trail. You take a breath with each step. When you make the rules, there's no way to fail. Stop to smell the flowers, take an hour to capture that shade of blue. You move with determination to an unknown destination, but trust where the trail is taking you. 2 steps forward, one step back. The waltz of creativity. Chasing your vision on a mission to make meaning from the pieces of the puzzle only you can see. Rejection, exhaustion, dissatisfaction, recognition, realization, reflection, organization, inspiration, determination, exploration, action, distraction, correction, direction, intention, hesitation, preparation, declaration, revolution, liberation, celebration. Two steps forward, one step back, the waltz of creativity. Chasing your vision on a mission to make meaning from the pieces of the puzzle only you can see. The music stops, the dance ends, you slowly put down your pen. Celebrate what you've created, but tomorrow you'll do the dance again. Two steps forward, one step back, the waltz of creativity. Chasing your vision on a mission to make meaning from the pieces of the puzzle only you can see. Yeah, so listeners, you just got a sneak preview of that song, but it's going to come out on April 8th. 1 + 7 is 8. It's coming out Friday,
Yay.
April 8th.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. And actually, it's so funny, not to get meta here, but what you were saying about your friends, you know, reading your poems and leaving those words and like how they resonate with it, and then putting it in that book. I went to my grumpy place a little bit this week as I was revisiting the song, and I was like, this is so cliche. So it's good to be reminded. It was like, no, it's not cliche. You just landed it on the nose.
Yes, no, I don't think there's anything cliche about this song. Really, there isn't. But yeah, it's and I'm just going back to. I'm just going to pull back a little bit in regards to how we met, because this was a moment where the inner voice said, "Do something," and I followed it, because originally you were there with your friend, and I was talking to her, because we were talking writing and poetry and all that kind of stuff. So she was kind of the focal point. And then we started talking a little bit. And then that's where I got the little nudge to ask you about your songwriting and, you know, how something like that would go. So, you know, just to follow your gut instinct, follow that voice and go, because great things can happen like we heard, you know, so.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, no, it's a very good thing. And I appreciate it. And I actually wasn't like that. It's just been a while since I looked at the song, and I was just like,
I get it. Isn't it interesting? Well, the thing is, you're in a different place now than you were when you wrote the song. I'm in a different place than when I wrote this book. And I have the poetry together for the second book, because it is a trilogy. And now I look at this one, and I'm like, I mean, I'm still proud of what I did, but it's, you know, you're just in a different place.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Exactly. And that's how I feel about my album and everything else I put out, where it's not necessarily like, it's not necessarily that anything is bad. It's just like, that was written by past me.
Right. Exactly. And you have grown since then.
Yeah. And so you have to kind of look at yourself in the mirror in this weird way, and that's the beauty of art. But it also, like, it requires radical self-acceptance, which is kind of just good in general to have.
Yes, exactly. Again, allow yourself, give yourself permission to be who you are now, and give yourself permission to where you were.
Yeah,
that's okay. It's yeah, absolutely. I agree.
absolutely. Oh my goodness. This has been such an amazing conversation. I can't believe we're like we're rounding it up already, but
Right.
so you mentioned that your books were going to be a trilogy. I guess tell the audience a little bit about like what you have going on next.
Okay. Well, the first book is, although the cover is color, it's black and white, and that's purposefully done like that because of the darkness that we find ourselves in when we go through seasons, the things that we experience. And I wanted to let people see that you are not alone, but there's still beauty in the black and white. There is still beauty there. The next book is the actions. Is you're getting your act together, you're finding things out. How do I proceed? Where do I go? What do I do? I'll try this works, I'll try that doesn't work. So the next book is this one is more general. The next book has more spirituality in it. It has more poems about God and how I connected with God, how I found God in this mess. That's the next book, and it'll be partial color, partial black and white. And then the third one are the blessings that you receive when you go through the season. And that will be all color at that point. So it's just the process of how you walk through a season. First, it's like, the second one, okay, putting up the sleeves and saying, I got to move on, I got to do this. And then the third one is like, oh, you've got all this great stuff happening afterwards. So that's my trilogy right there.
I love that. And it makes me think, here's the Richard Rohr quote. It makes me think of a phrase of Richard Rohr, says a lot, is the spiritual journey of order, disorder, and reorder.
Yes, amen. That's it.
And that's kind of a very similar trajectory to that. And yeah. I mean, it's classic hero's journey structure too. But that's really exciting. And I love hearing that it was intentional, that the book was like black and white. And yeah, that's so cool hearing about your process, and I'm so excited to see the next books. Where can people find out more about what you do?
They can go on to midlifepoetry.net, which is my website, and they can get the book from there. They can see my story on that. They can see what other people said after reading the book. And then they can also go to Amazon.com. It's on there also if they want to order it from there.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll put those links in the show notes and stuff. Okay. Before we wrap up, any other wise words or things that you want to say?
My big thing is for people to realize that they should not compare themselves with others by others' intentions. How does it go now? Other intention, their action. No, others' actions and your intentions. You are good where you are. Keep going, keep moving, keep exploring where it leads you. Give yourself permission to work, give yourself permission to rest. Just keep moving forward. That's all you can do. And be okay when it's tough sometimes. Be okay when you need to take a break, but just keep moving forward. You're worth it. You're the only one of your kind, and you should let us all around you experience who you are, because you're the only one there is.
Thank you for listening to Faith in What Resonates. The theme music for this show is an original composition called My Journey, My Song, the first song I wrote when I was 19. Faith in What Resonates is part of the New Faith New Media Network. You can discuss this and future episodes in the New Faith New Media Facebook group or at our new website, newfaithnewmedia.net. You can also follow us on social media, and those links are in the show notes. If you like this show, make sure to subscribe, and subscribing will also keep you in the loop on our other episodes. All of our shows go out on the same podcast feed, so hit that subscribe wherever you are listening to this show. You can also support New Faith New Media by becoming a patron, and the link for that is in the show notes. All patrons get access to our exclusive podcast, Blessed Lunatics, where myself and the other members of New Faith New Media drink and talk about our faith journeys and sort of banter about various topics. But it's a good time, and if you want to hear me like get a little buzzed while talking to a priest, that is the vibe that we strive for. Anyway, if you want to know more about my music, you can head to my website, gailgallaghermusic.com. And as always, thank you for listening, and remember to stay curious and follow the magic of the things that resonate.